The ideal zoo for the 21st century is a zoo that is aware of its responsibility for conservation.
We can translate the knowledge and expertise that we have in exhibiting species to conservation of those species in the wild.
Zoos have huge potential. If you look at the volume of people that visit zoos, 140 million people visit Waza zoos. That's a massive number of people to reach with a conservation message.
I think the urgency of conservation, because things are happening very fast now calls for action. I mean, we have been talking about conservation for many years. And a lot of politicians have said that they made resolutions and conventions, etc., but nothing has been done, or at least too little has been done. But now it's time for action. If we don't try to address this problem, then we will lose a lot of species, lose a lot of biodiversity. And that's irresponsible if we just watch and doing nothing. Zoos are some sort of an open window to nature, where we can present the nature to people. The nature people will never get an opportunity to see themselves. And when you buy a ticket to the zoo, part of the money you pay for your ticket, you actually pay for those conservation activities that the zoos are involved in the wild. You actually become a conservationist yourself. And I think that's very important, and it's also important for the zoos to show this to people, to tell them we can help the fight against loss of biodiversity. Waza is working together with other similar organizations all over the globe, and the European zoos link up very closely with IUCN, which is the Global Nature Conservation Organization. It's a sort of a UN for nature. If we're just alone as one zoo, we cannot do very much. But combining the whole global network of zoos and aquaria, we can really make a difference. Many years ago, we started to work with a researcher working with lowland tapir, and that's Patricia Medici, who is a biologist, conservationist, Brazilian. I think Patty's way of running her project with the lowland tapir is a master example of how zoos and the field researchers can work together.
The strength of linking my field activities with zoos has so many different sides, because it gives me the chance to share what I do in the wild with the zoo community, and gives me the chance to provide information to better care of tapirs in captivity. On the other hand, it gives zoos the chance to come to our field sites, to experience field work with us, to exchange ideas, exchange information. I think the ideal model for a zoo in the 21st century would be a combination of providing the general public with the opportunity of seeing these wonderful animals and falling in love with these wonderful animals, and continuing to contribute to conservation in the wild and getting more involved, sending people to participate in this field project so that they can bring the stories from the field to the zoos and share those stories with the general public. So it becomes a cycle, it becomes a process of exchange of information between ex situ, in situ, conservation in the wild, conservation in captivity.
I think it's important that people have a face-to-face encounter with other species, and to be within feet of a big cat, an elephant, some very small beautiful bird, some tiny ugly reptile. These are very special experiences, and that intimacy that you can have in a zoo to see something that's very real makes the experience alive. zoos touch all socio-economic classes, all ethnic backgrounds. Everybody brings their children to the zoo. And it's a direct way for family learning. So the whole family is learning about conservation. And people have an experience that raises their awareness of how important the natural environment is, how every species on the planet, all of the biodiversity that we have, is the nuts and bolts of the machinery that make our planet work. And people, if they have a good experience at a zoo, go away understanding that. Nobody works in zoos because they like to see animals in artificial environments. We do it because we care about the long-term future of those species. For a long time I've been involved specifically with small carnivore conservation, and I was contacted by a project in Vietnam about 10 years ago that was working with the Austin civet, this particularly beautiful small carnivore that comes from northern Vietnam. And we tried to outline very clear goals that, as well as looking after specifically the Austin civets through breeding them in the national park, we were also looking at supporting resources to schools in Vietnam, to raise awareness of illegal wildlife trade, to train forest rangers to be more effective in anti-poaching, to raise money through the carnivore program in Vietnam to allow research into the problems facing Southeast Asia.
I studying in International Training Center of Daro Wildlife Conservation Trust. And I came here to learning about biodiversity conservation and education between the zoo and conservation. We have people from 10 different countries, South America, Africa, and Asia. We all from developing country, and we have same problem with wildlife and conservation. And also a lot of things we can learn from each other. The main problem about wildlife in Vietnam is hunting and habitat loss. Most of the wildlife have been hunted for the meat consumption or the traditional medicine, for pet or the souvenir. I am doing this course because in Vietnam we don't have very much knowledge about the conservation, and so I want to learn more about technique and to see more about how people doing with the wildlife and with biodiversity, and to have for my country. I think more and more young people like me care for the conservation, and I think the future we care better for the biodiversity and conservation.
Morning! Come on then, people.
The best moment I've had in my career was probably going back to Madagascar, where I've spent a lot of time working with critically endangered lemurs, and to be able to see that that zoos are making a difference on the ground in Madagascar was actually one of my favorite moments. What is new now since a number of years, and what Waza has really contributed to making a difference, is that zoos have joined forces and joined expertise to carry out conservation programs in the wild. And that has made a big difference to the amount of funding that is available for conservation in situ, and also the amount of expertise that is contributing to those programs. Zoos are actually on the forefront of species conservation, that is really looking after single species or single populations of animals in the wild, because we are very good at that. We keep species, we breed species, we show species of animals to the public, and we can translate the knowledge and expertise that we have to conservation of those species in the wild.
Education, conservation and research are the three primary roles for zoos.
Zoos should never become museums. Zoos should not be the last resort of an animal.